Welcome to the New Age One podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, qigong, and meditation. In this episode, we wrap up our look at the Gao Style of Bagua with Lotus Shu talking about the straight line forms of the Gao Style and how it's used as the sort of main training method for the fighting applications. So we talk about that. We talk about the origins of the straight line Bagua forms. And then in this week's Patreon episode, we begin a three-part series on Jess's trip to Wudong Mountain. He's going to tell us about going up to the top of the mountain and doing some training and just kind of give us a taste of what the trip was like. So check that out. We also have all our interviews and extra bonus episodes and all that on the Patreon. So give it a look. Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Take care of yourselves and be well.
In today's episode, we're going to complete our look at Lotus Shu and the Yizhang martial arts school of Taiwan. This is from Bagua Journal, Volume 3, Number 5, from July and August of 1993. So the final section is Lo's approach to Bagua fighting. So Dan Miller writes the following. In Lo's system, the primary vehicle used to develop a foundation in Bagua fighting technique is the straight line practice, or Hotian Bagua. In performing the 64 straight line sets of the Hotian Bagua, the student will condition the body, developing internal strength, and ingrain the correct principles of movement, structure, body integration, and alignment, while at the same time learning the major aspects of Bagua approach to fighting. While each of the 64 sets may be thought of as techniques, Lo discourages the technique-oriented approach. Again, he feels that the movements inherent in the Hotian Bagua are expressing principles of motion, not single techniques. If the students can discover which principles of motion each set develops, then he or she can learn to apply that principle in a variety of situations. If the practitioner grasps a principle and the body is developed in accordance with that principle of motion, then the principle can be applied in numerous ways. So that's the thinking behind the straight line sets of Bagua. And not every school has the straight line sets. Most of the ones I've experienced and studied don't have it, but it's a big thing in the Gao style, especially. Seems like the 64 really stands out as one of the primary and special aspects of the school. But yeah, the idea being you do Bagua moves in a straight line to condition, get your alignments, correct, get a correct structure and posture, body integration and alignment. And it's kind of a little easier to do than it is on a circle, in some ways. It kind of gives you a more easy to absorb way of doing stuff, especially as a beginner. When you're on the circle, it can be very confusing at first. So the 64 straight lines are a nice way to just sort of get some basic motions into your system.
We've talked about this a bunch, but I think
Totally.
it's that essentially doing Bagua movements with the Sheng / Tai Chi approach, right? So doing things in a straight line with more forward weighted postures, things like that gives you
Right.
that sort of structural component that you need so that when you start doing things on a circle, you're not just wobbling and falling over the whole time.
Yeah, which you've got to do eventually, but it definitely gives you something to compare back and forth. The way Lo teaches, you do the circling forms and the straight line forms sort of side by side. And even in the same class session, you might do some of both. And it kind of gives you a way to approach the movements from two different angles. So I think that can be useful. I remember when I was doing this training back in the day, and one of your thoughts was that one way, the way Kumar does it basically is he doesn't have the 64 straight lines. You just learn Sheng instead. So that's going to be your straight line type of training that complements your Bagua circling, and it serves the same kind of purpose basically.
Well, and I think in the circle version, rather than having a different technique, like a different, set of movements for each little one of those possible ways you can do a change differently, you'll just show it like, oh, you can turn your hand this way or you can turn your hand this. So there's variables within the circle forms. What the straight lines are is they took each of the 8 variations that you can do in a circle and put it in a straight line, essentially, right? So when you're doing the circle forms, you might learn it as just a application, or you might learn it as like, okay, well, if you're trying to target this organ, you do it this way kind of stuff. It's less about a, like I said, like it's not really about a technique, it's about a principle.
Yeah, and the 64 really, really displays that at its most extreme of just like taking a single principle, making 8 different versions of it from the very smallest to the very biggest, sometimes in ways that don't make obvious sense. Like the 64 aren't in a logical order as you'd think, as especially as a foreigner. Like they don't you don't do it small, then medium, then large each time, right? Like it's nothing like that. You just do one version, then another version, then another version. There could be a logic to it that I've never been able to penetrate, but it's kind of
I mean,
you just jump around.
there was probably some, I'm sure when he created those forms, he had some, model that he was looking at of.
Well, there are, because by the time you've, like, say set one, there's 8 different ones in set one. By the time you're done with those, you've done this particular motion every different way, from big to small to front to back to left to right, from diagonals, like blah, blah, blah. But they're not in a nice set order. Like you might do the big one, then the diagonal one, then the small one, like it'd be I would have created it with more like I don't know, like consistency. There's not consistency is what as an editor, I'm always looking for consistency and patterns and stuff. And by the time you're done with the 64, you've done everything you could possibly do basically, but like, it's not necessarily in the order one would uh
Well, like, yeah, but I
easy to
mean, like,
remember.
just as a comparison, right? In the Ian Fu style that like
Hmm.
she taught
Mm.
had 72 straight line forms, right? So it's like, there's, yeah, again,
Right, they got
like,
multiple sets with b big numbers in them, and
well,
the
my
way,
favorite is the
yeah.
504 freehand exercises. It's like, what? I mean,
And
that's
now, and
a
there's
number.
something that makes a little more sense in the term like lion has a smashing strikes, rooster has
Right,
smashing
right, right.
strikes,
But I'm
unicorn has
saying is
smashing
like,
strikes. There's a little more. You could put it in a little bit more into an Excel doc, and they'd all sort of flow a little bit better.
right,
The
but
Gao
I'm,
Style
yeah.
64 is
What
a
I'm
little
saying is
more
when you actually
chaotic.
start to break it down and make it like a give a name to every variation of a technique, you're getting into hundreds,
Right,
right?
right.
Which is,
You could end up with
if you
many,
got
many
the time to
hundreds.
like show, all that, that's great. But for most people, if you just, like Lois said in the thing, if you just give them one or two versions that express that principle, they can then take
You got
that.
to absorb the principle. If
Yeah,
that
because
means
it's like,
doing naming hundreds of them might help some people. Boiling it down to a single one might help other people. It's like Bagua does have something for everyone in that way. If you have different learning styles or whatever, your style
right. I
will
mean, it's,
hopefully
yeah.
have a way to deliver that kind of.
I think the straight line forms in a sense are more like Tai Chi, where it gives your mind something to do.
Yeah,
You have this like, okay, I'm
something to focus on.
continuously
Yeah,
moving and I have to kind of keep remember, keep
keep
not
in
remember,
mind. Yeah,
keep kind of what move comes next, what move comes next,
yeah,
what move
yeah.
comes next. And that keeps a certain sort of active sort of intellect into what you're doing. Where like with
Right.
Baba, you
The
might be
circle
doing if you're
forms.
doing a
Yeah,
circle form, you're just doing one movement, or even if you're doing all 8 of them, it's still only 8 movements.
right,
And you're repeating so it's like you're walking in a circle a whole bunch and then
right,
going
right,
around every so often. So the amount that you're actively having to go, okay, move this, move that, move this, move that is, in a sense, it's a lot less, but
yeah.
that gives you all this time to focus on the principle, right? Like, so
Totally.
you're not
They're
as
they're
focused.
complementary opposites. I mean, you're using your brain in complete opposites that are perfect complements to each other. So it's a real nice yin yang combo
Yeah, and usually
that
without the first one, the Tai Chi slash Xingyi straight line approach, um, you couldn't do the second one, right? Your mind won't have the ability to stay focused while you're circle walking if you haven't done something to train it to do what you want, which is a lot of what the that's the E part of Sheng Yi, right? The whole thing of, you tell your body to do something and it does it basically. And
Hmm.
and until you have that on a in a the way I think of it is just a normal range of human motions, right? Things that, like you would do if you were digging or uh pushing a car or something that's like not too weird in terms, like all the motions in Tai Chi, most of the ones in Xing Yi, most of the ones in the straight line forms, those are things that if you were swatting a fly away from your head, you might swing your arm over or like kind of bring it over your head. You're not doing a lot of weird twists and, you know, walking in a weird way that you would never do outside of that, right? So it gives you this sort of context for how to move that way naturally, like in your whole life. And then when you go to do something like the circle stuff, you're adding that torque to it, but because you've got that integration from the other stuff, that torque makes you stronger, not weaker. Where if you don't
Mm.
have that integration, you torque it and it's just gonna fall apart. And this is where most people, when they first do Bagua, if they don't have this internal connection stuff that you get from Neigong and you get from internal martial arts and all that, you they just kind of, I mean, yeah, everybody's seen it if you watch people do Bagua, that their feet start going in one direction, their arms going in another, they're flopping all over, their heads bobbing up and down, and it's like
Quite
nothing's
counterintuitive.
nothing's connected and it's not smooth. And that's all, that's what these other trainings really give you, is that, ability to do something.
Definitely. So the next section says, when approaching a fighting situation, Lowe states that it's important to have a quiet mind. If the mind gets flustered, the body will lose continuity, connection, and power.
Mhm.
There's an old martial arts phrase which says, if the enemy doesn't move, I don't move. If the enemy moves, I move first. Lowe interprets this to mean that in not moving, the heart is calm and the body is in standby. He says, even when the body is in motion, the mind is quiet and aware. As soon as the opponent is ready to set up for an attack, you attack first and beat him to the punch. So yeah, that's a concept that comes up in a lot in internal martial arts where if the enemy doesn't move, I don't move. So that's that quiet mind that a lot of Xing Yi, Bagua, especially Tai Chi, I mean, it's an absolute emphasis in all the internal martial arts. That's that meditative side of it that people will say, it's martial arts, it's not about meditation. Well, it stole meditation in
Well,
order
that's
to help your mind stay calm and quiet, and then right before the enemy's about to go, boom, you go first because your mind is quieter and more aware and more ready to go than the other guy.
that's the Sun Tzu part of it, right?
Mm.
Like in Baiwa's book, the martial chapter is the Sun Tzu, based,
Hmm.
where the Negong is Ludong Bin and the meditation is Lao Tzu. The part that he talks about for the martial arts is Sun Tzu, because
Mm.
basically it's that idea that, you can, I think he said it in the last one, they move, if they attack, you move
Yep.
backwards. If they
Well,
attack,
yeah, on Patreon, we were talking about
oh, it's Patreon. Okay.
there's a few other statements that come after before the enemy moves and I move first. He's got a more detailed way of breaking that
But
out in
that,
the
but
talk
that
on Patreon.
basically, like this one is the line from Sun Tzu about
Yeah,
they attack first, but I arrive first.
right.
In that, the
And
way
Tai
you
Chi
get
Classics is filled with that, right?
right, I mean, yeah, Tai Chi uses a ton too, but it's that idea that it's angles, right? That if somebody's attacking you on a straight line, the way you arrive first, but even though you started after they did, is you take a better angle. And like,
Percent. And you can only do that with that quality of mind that he's talking about. If your mind is flustered and upset and thinking two steps ahead, you're not going to be able to get in position to intercept like that.
I was just thinking of the Way of the Warrior documentary with
Mm,
Sheng. There's one part where he has the guy sort of push, like try to attack
push
him,
his
and
chest.
yeah, and he sort of uses that
Cuts
angle,
him off by the angle, yeah.
and that's really the whole thing. But a large part of the ability to take a better angle with your whole body is what a lot of those straight line type of movements are in for. Is so it's like you get used to the idea of if something's coming straight at you, you don't stand there and try to hit it. You take a 45-degree angle and you attack it on that weak
Right.
angle, right? I mean, and it's like, and that's why so many of those straight line forms look a lot like Sheng techniques, because essentially, when you take a Bagua technique and you do it straight line, it looks a lot like a
It's awfully like
Sheng
Sheng.
or a Tai Chi technique. Or you could
And
say the
yeah.
other way, right? You could say that the Bagua ones look like,
Right, yeah. I mean,
whatever it
that's what Dong
was.
Hai Chuan did. He took a guy who was great at straight line and put him
Yeah,
on a circle. So if you
exactly.
take him off the circle back on the straight line,
Right.
it looks awfully like what it used to be before then.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you've got the idea of these guys in Tianjin and Beijing mixing Bagua and Xingyi and hanging
Sure.
out and fighting each other and sparring and trying out all these techniques.
And
So
there was a
those
lot of like
lot of
reverse
cross
engineering
fertilizations.
and, like
And
guys.
Gao Sheng was he loved Xingyi, so and he loved Tai Chi
And Tai
too. So,
Chi. Yeah. I
yeah, so I
mean,
mean, there's definitely a lot of influence. And that reminds me of how when the Gao family Tianjin group came visiting the Tangshu Dao, they opened it to the public. So me and some friends went to that, and I remember Liu Shuhong, the leader of that, said, "We're really proud of Gao Style Bagua because it's the newest martial art in China that was created most recently of all the
right.
traditional martial arts, and it incorporates techniques from other, from the best of Xingyi and Tai Chi and Hong Chuan are incorporated into it." And he saw that as a positive. Like we're the modern internal martial art. That makes us better than these old ones. And I was like, yeah,
Well, I mean,
that's one way to look at it. Yeah.
in a sense, it's the same kind of thing that you have with like the Chen Ling Tai Chi
Hmm.
form. Um,
Sure. You
he
could
took
claim to
some,
be the most recent. Yeah, we're
he
the
took
innovation.
where he took, the classical Tai Chi form, and then he kind of incorporated some Xingyi and some Bagua into that, right? So he kind of went the other way, right? Which is, I think, really like ultimately, I mean, in the modern age, it's a huge time saver for people if you can condense things, right? So, I mean, you can argue whether it's the most
Yeah.
pure blah blah
Right, right,
blah that
right.
bullshit. But as far as like if you're trying to teach people something in a short amount of time and you want to give them as much as possible, the more concise information you can, give them in a nice organized container, the better, right? So, having hundreds of techniques or all of these weird energy things that you're doing is great. Again, if you have the time to go through them and learn them, properly. But very few people in the modern age are going to have
Right.
that kind of time and commitment to,
Definitely.
anything, let alone,
I mean, isn't that really the challenge of this of learning this stuff now? Because it's like, well, you're going to practice every day for the rest of your life anyway. So like, why bother using a shortcut? Because you're just going to have to you're just going to why get there quicker when you've got nothing better to do on one hand. On the other hand, why dick around with a bunch of stuff that's not getting you anywhere and it's taking forever and try to, move a little more,
well, I
move a little
mean, this,
faster. All right, so next is a topic that I enjoy that Lo always he's
Rojo.
always been very helpful with, huh?
Is it Rojo?
No, sparring.
Mm.
But it's the question of what do you do when someone's standing in front of you and you're supposed to fight him? He says, when sparring, Lo likes to take the initiative, do
Mm.
something to elicit a response from the opponent. I guess maybe it's because I'm from Aikido where you have to wait for the other person to attack, which I always found kind of frustrating. In Bagua, like Lo's always he talks about opening up and getting inside the person and finding a way to do something to someone. And I always appreciate that because it's not like grab my wrist and now I'm going to do something. It's like, no, I'm going to take the initiative, start this shit. So he says, do something to elicit a response from the opponent. He then seeks the fastest angle of attack based on the opponent's reaction. He says to create the situation and then control the situation. So I like that idea. It's something we've been talking about on the Patreon, on the article that he did for Taiwan Wulin that we had translated. But yeah, the idea is you stick something out and then they've got to respond. Now you've got an opportunity to do a technique. But if you just wait for them to come in first, that can work too. But if they're just standing there and just you're circling each other, somebody's got to do something. And maybe it's because I have maybe a short attention span. I find myself wanting to, you got to do something to start the action. So a jab to the face, a poke, Chun where you drill to their face is a classic one that Lo will teach. Then you base your action off of their reaction, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where what you end up learning is it's back to principles, right? That when you attack someone, there's really only so many things that the human mind does when it's threatened. And so you learn to kind of interpret those within your technique. It's a bit like poker, right? You know, they show their hand, and now you know exactly which, angle to hit them on, right?
Yeah.
Rather than when they don't show their hand, you kind of have to guess or wait till they do something, which
Right.
gives you less time to
Right.
control what's happening, right? So
Right.
this way you're sort of, again, it's like you're taking the initiative so that you get to be the one that says, and
You
then,
set the
oh,
terms of the
yeah,
engagement,
yeah, yeah,
basically, which can be to
exactly.
your advantage.
Again, this is all Sun Tzu stuff, but yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
This is a,
So he says, but how do you do that? So he continues by saying that in a fighting situation, an opponent will usually have his body pretty well protected and covered up. In order to get inside, you have to first to strike to the outside, such as the hands or the arms, to elicit a response, fluster the opponent, or grab something and use it as a handle to offset the opponent. Once the opponent has been flustered or offset, then you can move in and apply your striking, kicking, locking, or throwing applications to the more vulnerable parts of the body. So he makes a good point that it's really hard to get inside and attack somebody's vulnerable stomach, chest, throat, neck, chin, face. They're covering themselves up. So it's not as easy as they make it look in the magazine. So you gotta do something to their outside and crack that defense. So he uses the idea, and we were talking about this on the Patreon, of flustering them by poking at them or offsetting them by bonking them and sort of chucking them off their balance a little bit. Now you've cracked the shell a little bit and you have a chance to get inside. Otherwise, if you just try to go inside right off the bat, it's never going to work because they're protecting themselves and covering up and keeping their hands up. So I,
yeah, I
I
mean,
appreciate that he starts from a nice basic position of, damn, they're armored. What am I supposed to do? Well, you got to find a way to crack the armor first.
mhm.
So he says, in striking the body, Lo will move in soft and fluid and make contact with the opponent's body before applying power. The power is applied in a sharp, quick burst after the hand has touched the opponent's body. He says, even if the opponent has practiced body conditioning exercises such as iron shirt, this kind of shock power or short jing will penetrate. This is one reason that a Bagua practitioner never wants an opponent to touch his or her body. So the idea is to stay soft until you make contact. Then your structure becomes very strong at the moment of contact.
There's that short power.
Yeah, then you short. So that's the idea of using your hands in a very fluid, loose way as you try to touch the other person initially. You don't come in with a lunging strong punch like maybe karate, for instance, where you're like lunge forward with a straight flat punch.
Well,
Here he's
you're not, yeah, because it like you're not trying to push them away. You're trying to get them closer to you.
true.
So it's a bit, it's more like a grappling type of thing where you want them to be up against your body, not keeping them away with long strikes.
Right. So you start with the soft, then apply the hard instead of starting off hard and sort of bouncing them away from you. You're you're
Well,
using your
yeah,
soft hands to get them closer.
because again, if they're hunkered down, right, and you just throw punches at them, all you're doing is tiring yourself out, hitting their body,
Mm,
and it's like that's just going to wear you down, right?
right.
If you hook onto their forearm or something and swing around, you can kind of pull. It's like again, you either their arm's going to move and give you an opening to like do a hook, or if they're really strong, that you're just going to move their whole body and kind of turn them to the side a little bit. And so it gives you that option of, um, are you moving them or are you moving around them essentially?
Hmm. Yeah. So the article continues, in moving from outside to inside, or in setting up to execute an application, which will inflict the most amount of damage.
So why don't you define outside, inside? Just
So he's saying moving from outside to inside. In other words, you're attacking someone's, defenses, so they react. Now you can get into their inside.
Right.
So you're
So the
working your way
outside
in.
would be like if they have their arms up, the outside
Right.
is their forearms, their shoulder, the outside of their arm,
Right.
exterior part, and then the anterior part, that's the inside. So where their chest is, where their
Right.
armpits are. And
So it's like you attack from the outside with a big swat. They rise up to defend it. So now you hook inside, and now you're on the anterior portion, so to speak. And as he says here, you're trying to inflict the most amount of damage. He says, Low again turns to the principle of change. Baguazhang stylists are famous for setting up one technique and then quickly changing to another midstream to throw the opponent off balance. For instance, Low loves to set up for a throw by offsetting the opponent, then abandoning the throw, turning the body quickly while the opponent is falling, and striking him against the momentum of the fall.
mm,
Baiting, grabbing, offsetting, quickly changing, and striking at the optimum angle. Low is able to inflict a tremendous amount of damage in a very short amount of time. So the idea here being tremendous amount of damage is the is what you're, and use the principle of change to do it. So I like that idea of you pull them, you start to throw, you catch them in a momentum loop and they start to fall one direction, then you spin and turn and punch them in the spine as they're falling. That's something that Low and other Bagua practitioners I've met specialize in. So the idea is you catch them, move them with use their momentum to cause them to start to begin a fall, and then as they're starting to fall, abandon the throw partway through and swing your other arm to punch them in the spine or hook them across the neck in a bad angle as their momentum is heading towards the ground. So that adds this idea of not only are you being thrown face first into the ground, but you're being struck midway through the throw while you're in midair and you have no ability to defend yourself. That's one of these Baguas concepts, that ability to change rapidly. So, it's bad enough to get thrown, right? That sucks. But if you're being thrown and you're being struck from some opposing angle at the same time you're falling, and usually, with your head or spine heading towards the ground in a Bagua throw, that just adds insult to injury. It adds injury to injury, which is insulting. And it's super disorienting. And since you're in midair, you can't defend. There's nothing you can do. You could, it's all happening super fast. And I don't know. I think there's something brilliant about it. And in Lowe's class, you'll definitely see him do that over and over to just give you that just surprising jolt out of nowhere. You think you're being thrown backwards in a back fall, but then his other arm swings around and catches your neck and cranks it the other direction as you're falling. Or throwing while holding on to both your hands at the same time and just launching you face first towards the ground. There's no way to do an Aikido roll or a fall, or it's just Bagua is a very vicious and just ruthless approach to tripping and sweeping and throwing that it's beautiful in its own way and just
well, and again, it's that thing I was talking about before, where you set up a throw, right? But you're not really setting up a throw. You're seeing what they do if you start to set up a throw and then from that you have, in Lowe's case, probably 20 different options of, things you can do at that point to, either continue the throw, change it into a strike, turn it into a kick,
yeah,
right? And it's that idea, or do a combination of those things. And it's like, that you kind of get, I think, just from doing it a bunch. And
yeah,
there's a sort of natural kind of things just end up in the right place for you to do a technique. You're not even really trying to do it. It's like, oh, my
yeah,
foot's there. So I can, when I just do the stretch that I would do normally, it turns into a foot sweep,
yeah.
and that
And
kind of,
just compounds, it layers that way. I think one guy who said it was Earl Montague from back in the 80s. He was an internal martial
oh, yeah.
arts Tai
Oh,
Chi
well,
Bagua guy from Australia who
he's
was
great.
very opinionated, fighting oriented. And he always said, Bagua Zhang is the art of overkill. And I like that. It's just like multiple techniques. Just it's not enough to slam somebody on their back. You gotta, crank their neck and punch them in the stomach and leg sweep as they're falling and
Well, I mean,
make
that's
it
where the
absolutely
multiple
worse.
attacker thing, I think, comes in, right?
Mm,
Like, because if you have more than one person coming at you, you don't want to have to do something to someone, and then they do something, and then you do something, and then they do something, and you just want to finish
If
that
you've
guy.
got an advantage, you just take advantage and just keep
Mhm.
taking and
Yep.
taking and taking. Like Lo will sometimes say, be greedy.
Yeah.
Just get greedy as hell and just you got one with one, then get two or three. Just keep taking till you can't take no
Mhm.
more. He says that the if the student does not get a real taste, he or she will only be exposed to the outer shell and will end up with a dead technique. Lowe is careful enough not to hurt or injure his students. However, he says that the student cannot simply watch a technique being applied and fully appreciate all of the subtlety of the application. The student needs to feel where and when the force is light, where it is heavy, and how it is physically applied. When Lo applies his Bagua, there's no doubt left in your mind that he knows exactly what he's doing, that he can change and vary his application to counter any move which might be made in defense, and that his level of skill is highly refined. And so that's the end of the article from 30 years ago. He's yeah, he was a highly accomplished guy at a young age. So I think it was
Yeah.
lucky for us Westerners that he was able to come to the West and teach as much as he has. And
Yeah.
as far as I know, he hasn't been back since 2019, but hopefully, I don't know, maybe next year is the time that he'll come back to the States. And if anybody listening gets a chance to check him out, I think you'll get a lot, even if you don't want to like learn Gao style and completely learn his style or whatever, there's nothing like getting in the classroom with him and watching him go to
Getting a
work because the
taste.
guy's a genius. And yeah, it's
Get
just
a,
watching a master
yeah.
at work is always
Get a
worth
taste.
seeing.
All right, man.
All right, well, good talking to you.
Hey, folks, hope you enjoyed the episode. Like I said, go over to Patreon, $5 a month. You can join up, get one bonus episode for every regular episode we release. And you will be able to hear the first part of a 3-part series where Jess talks about his trip to China. Also be posting some pictures from his trip up on the Instagram, so you can check that out too. All right, thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.